Good morning, Hope Waukee. Good morning. It's so good to hang out with you all. I was here around Christmas time, and that seems like forever ago, and so it's good to be back with you. This spring, I was here during Advent, and now I'm here during Lent, and so we'll just make this a liturgical calendar thing. But I love hanging out with all of you, and I get to talk about something super exciting this morning. We get to talk about miracles. We are in this Lenten sermon series, The Jesus Who's More Than We Think, and we're getting to know Jesus at a whole new level, maybe deeper and better, and we're shocked by who he is, and it's really exciting. And when we talk about Jesus, we really need to talk about miracles. And so I wanted to start with that clip from Alpha. If you've ever taken Alpha, that's a really good place to dive into your faith and figure out who Jesus is. This is from our healing prayer talk, and they asked people on the street, have you ever seen a miracle? Do you believe in miracles? And you heard kind of the various responses to that question. Some people were like, no, I don't think I've seen a miracle. And other people were like, no, life itself is a miracle, or the birth of my daughter, or hey, I'm having a good day with my buddy's dog. That seems like a miracle. And so I challenge you this morning, as we think about the Jesus who's more than we can imagine, have you ever seen a miracle? What would you categorize as a miracle? And so as we walk through that this morning, there's kind of 4 things I want to touch on. What is a miracle? Did Jesus actually do them? Do they still happen? And why does it matter? This is all cool, but why does it actually matter? And so what is a miracle? And when you're figuring out the definition of anything, I feel like going to the dictionary is probably a good place. And so that's what I did. What is a miracle? I was like, let's see what Merriam-Webster has to say about what a miracle actually is. And there's kind of 3 definitions to a miracle. Here's the first definition they give us. An extraordinary event showing divine intervention in human affairs. I imagine when I ask you, have you ever seen a miracle? What is a miracle? This is probably the definition that most of us think about. A divine or extraordinary event showing divine intervention in human affairs. The big, I would call these level 1, category 1 miracles, definition 1 miracles, the crazy things that show maybe divine intervention in human affairs, the things that we can't really explain with human words. And certainly, this is the category of miracles that Jesus performs. We see Jesus walking on water. In our Bible reading, you heard Jesus calming a storm with just his words. We see Jesus feeding thousands of people with very little food, 5 loaves and 2 fish, and he feeds a crowd of 5,000 plus people. He raises Lazarus from the dead. He heals blind people, people who can't walk. He says, pick up your mat and go walk around. People just touch him and they are healed. This would be definition 1 miracles. And for most of us, when we hear the question, have you ever seen a miracle? I think this is where our brains jump to. This divine intervention in regular human things. And for some of us, we might say, yes, I've totally seen those. For most of us, I imagine we'd say, I don't know, I've read about them. I've heard of other people who've experienced that kind of miracle, but I don't know if I've experienced a miracle in that capacity. I found it interesting that Merriam-Webster had 3 definitions for a miracle. It's far more than just the really big things. Don't get me wrong. The really big things, the things we read about in the Gospels, are way cool. They are awesome. But Jesus wants us to know miracles all the time in all that we do, and that's kind of what the second definition speaks to. An extremely outstanding or unusual event, thing, or accomplishment. An extremely outstanding event, thing, or accomplishment. I imagine if I asked you that walking in this morning, has there ever been anything extremely outstanding or unusual in your life? I think most of us would be like, yeah, I got stories. Let me tell you about some of the crazy things that have happened in my life. We could call those a miracle. These are things, for me, it's sport things that come to mind. There's a movie called Miracle. This was the 1980 U.S. Olympic hockey team who beat the Soviet Union in the final, the world championship, Olympic champion hockey game, and we were not supposed to win that game. It's why the movie is called Miracle, because there was no way we were going to win. Extremely outstanding event or accomplishment. I'm also a really big basketball fan, and I really, really love Caitlin Clark, and so this is never gonna get old. Does anybody else remember when she made her career-winning, most time leading scoring shot from the University of Iowa? Okay, it was so far away from the three-point line, it was closer to half court. I love that it's still on the floor. I'm an Iowa grad, and so I love that it's still on the floor at the University of Iowa, and you can go see it. But we would say that was outstanding. That was an accomplishment or an event that I'm never gonna forget. It was awesome. We could say that's a miracle. Now, she's worked really hard to perform like that, but still, it's pretty amazing. Still outstanding. We might call that a miracle. The third definition of a miracle, according to Merriam-Webster, is a divinely natural phenomenon experienced humanly as the fulfillment of spiritual law. A divinely natural phenomenon, something that happens naturally, okay? But that we as humans experience as God's power at work in the world around us. Something that's naturally going to happen in the world that we look at and say, that's God showing up in power. That's God showing up in strength. These are things as simple as seasons. It is amazing to me that we experience seasons. Now, I'm so ready for spring and warm weather. I'm over the winter thing. It is the time of year where bulbs in the ground, I've got tulips and hyacinth in my garden that are starting to sprout up from the ground. And it's amazing to me that I did nothing, and they're still gonna sprout up and bloom. The earth was dead, and it is resurrecting back to life. Seasons. How incredible that God loves us so much that he gives us things like flowers, that he gives us things like trees that smell really good, whose leaves change colors. These are natural things that happen in the world around us that we might, maybe more often than not, on a daily basis, look at and go, that's just life. That's just how it is. I wonder what would happen if we opened our eyes a little bit to look at the little things and say, that's God's power. Those are miracles at work in the world around us. On the screen, you also see my 11-month-old. That's JoJo. And it's crazy to me, she's 11 months old. 1 year ago, she did not exist on this side of the world, right? She was in my tummy, but she didn't exist on this side of the world. In 11 months, that's what she looks like. We look at growth and aging. She didn't exist a year ago. And she's like her own tiny little person already. That's amazing. Natural phenomenon. This is a natural thing, growing and aging. It happens to all of us. Some of us aren't so happy about it. But man, is it a miracle? Life itself. The way that we grow up, the way that we learn. I take pictures of her monthly, and it is astounding to me, the changes in 11 months. I have 11 pictures. It is astounding to me. Life is a miracle. In the middle of the screen, you see a picture of, it's a rendering of the veil in the temple being torn in two when Jesus dies. When Jesus takes his last breath on the cross, we're told that the earth shakes. There is an earthquake. That is a natural phenomenon. Earthquakes happen. But at the exact moment that Jesus took his last breath, the earth shook. And the curtain in the temple that divided the regular part of the temple from the most holy place, the place that only the high priest could enter, and only once a year, it's where God's presence was said to dwell. Because of that natural phenomenon, that earthquake, that veil was torn in two. The thing that separated anybody else from God's presence no longer separated anyone from God's presence. It's the miracle of Jesus. It's what Jesus' death did for us. It brought us all into communion with him. And there was a natural phenomenon, an earthquake that happened when Jesus took his last breath, but that's God's power at work in the world. We would call that absolutely a miracle. And the Greek word for miracle all throughout the New Testament is dunamis. Everyone say dunamis. Dunamis. Looks like dynamis, and it is where we get the English word dynamite, but it is pronounced dunamis. Dunamis is literally translated power, mighty work, strength, or miracle. When we talk about miracles, most of us jump to definition 1 miracles, the things that have no explanation. Those are certainly miracles. But what the word miracle actually means in the original Greek is God's power. It's God's strength at work in the world around us. It's the way that God wants to show up in his power for you and for me. And so what I want you to hear this morning is that I want us all to see definition one miracles, and they do happen. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. But more than that, I want you to see miracles. I want you to see God's power and his strength all the time, in everything, all day, every day. I want you to see God's power and his miracles for what they really are. I want you to see them in all the things that you do every single day, so that at the end of a day, you can look back and go, I certainly saw God's power today. I certainly saw God's strength and his work at work in my life, because that's what miracles are, and the point of God's miracles. The point of Jesus showing miracles when he walks the earth, when we read about his life in the Gospels, isn't for the sake of the miracle themselves. They are cool. Don't get me wrong. It is so fun to read the gospel stories and read the narratives of the work that Jesus is doing. But the miracles aren't actually the point. The point is Jesus. The point is God at work in and through Jesus. It's that Jesus is God. The miracle is really Jesus. There's this thing in the Gospels, we call it the messianic secret. Mark's a good example of this if you go through and read Mark's Gospel. Jesus will perform miracles, and he tells people, don't tell anyone. It's the messianic secret. Jesus kind of has a timeline. He kind of knows what he's doing as far as his ministry goes. And he doesn't want miracles to be the end in of themselves. He wants the kingdom of God at work, the power of God at work in the world. He wants that to be the point. And so when Jesus tells people, yeah, I healed you, yeah, we did this amazing thing, don't tell anyone, it's not because Jesus is just humble. He is. But it's because the point was never the miracle. The point was God. The point was God's power at work in the world. And so if we are on a quest for miracles, namely just definition number one, miracles, and somebody asks us as a Christ follower, have you ever seen a miracle? And we say, no, not really. I think we're missing the point. I think we are missing God's power at work in the world around us all the time, because the miracle isn't the point. The point is God. And the point is his power and his strength. They all point back to Jesus and the abundant life that he wants for us, the power that he wants us to walk in every single day. So what's a miracle? It is God's power at work in the world around us. Literally, that's what a miracle is. To show up for us to know this kind of power all the time. The second question I wanted to touch on this morning is, did Jesus actually perform miracles? And I love this, the people on the screen who are like, I don't know, did he? And of course, there's a Starbucks cup, because I don't know if you've ever had Starbucks, but I would tell you, yes, that is a miracle. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I do love Starbucks a lot. But I have a story about Starbucks. Did Jesus actually perform miracles? It would be really easy for me to tell you, yes, Jesus actually performed miracles. Go read about them in the Gospels and leave it at that. But there are people who would say, but like, are the Gospels real? Like, is that real? And so here's my story about Starbucks. Shortly after Tyler and I got married, which was almost 8 years ago, it was the beginning of April that we got married, we moved to Madison, Wisconsin. We got married at Hope here in West Des Moines, and like 2 weeks later moved to Madison, Wisconsin, because Tyler had a job working for the Wisconsin Badgers. And I had a psychology degree, and I was looking at PhD psychology programs. I wanted to be a PhD professor of abnormal psychology because I'm weird and I like the weird stuff. So we moved to Madison, and I didn't know anybody. The PhD programs I was looking at were not close to Madison. And by the way, if you're earning a PhD, like, you don't really do that online. And so I had this period of like, what am I going to do? I have a psychology degree. What do people do with a psychology degree when they move random places? They work at Starbucks. Obviously, okay? So that is what I did when we moved to Madison, Wisconsin. And it was great. It was a super diverse part of Madison. I worked with a variety of different people, and I loved every single minute of it. And on my 10-minute breaks every day, I would grab my free cup of coffee. At least like 8 years ago, that's what you did on your break. They give you a free cup of coffee. So I grabbed my free coffee, and I ate a granola bar, and I did my 10-minute devotional for the day. I had it was Jesus Calling, Devo. So I'd sit down, eat my granola bar, and do my Devo. And I worked with diverse people who believed a lot of different stuff or believed nothing about God. And one day, my manager, his name was Miles, and Miles was from the UK. One day, my manager asked me, he walked by, and he was like, Ashley, isn't the Bible, do you like my British accent? Isn't the Bible just a good story? Isn't it just a good allegory? And I was like, Miles, no, like, it is a good story, but no, like, there's historical evidence to this. This isn't just a moral, this is how you should live. These are what good people do. I said, this is rooted in history, man. And the reason I wanted to be a PhD professor was to teach people. I started teaching my colleagues about Jesus. Like, they were asking questions about who Jesus was. And I got to teach them. I grew up in church. I grew up at Hope. I got to teach them based on what I had grown up knowing. And thus my phone call to Pastor Scott Raines in Ankeny to go, hey, I'm working at a Starbucks. I think I want to teach people about Jesus. And he goes, do it. Go to seminary. And I was like, okay. That's how I ended up here. Truly, that is the story. Anyway, I love teaching people about Jesus, and I loved being able to tell them, hey, no, like, did Jesus actually do these things? Absolutely. This isn't just a good story. These things are rooted in history. There are historians outside of the Bible. We call this extra biblical evidence, not inside the Bible, extra outside of the Bible. There are historians in history who write about the work that Jesus was doing. Josephus is one of them. Josephus was born just after Jesus died. And as he grows up, he's in the Roman Jewish culture. He's a Roman Jewish historian. And he writes about Jesus. And here's what he says about this man. Now there was about this time Jesus, a wise man, if it be lawful to call him a man, for he was a doer of wonderful works. There are historians, people outside the Bible, who are noting that, can we even call this guy a man? Like, he was so incredible. I don't know if that's the right term for him, but he was doing wonderful things. This was so immense that we have historians writing about it. Also, there are crowds everywhere that Jesus goes. The crowds in our Gospels are considered a main character. You heard it in our Bible reading today, that there were crowds following Jesus. Again, if you go home and read Mark, it's the shortest gospel. It's also the first gospel written. I know it comes second, but it was first. It's the shortest one. Go home and read Mark. Underline or circle the word crowds. They are a main character in the gospel stories. We are talking thousands, if not tens of thousands of people witnessing the work, the miracles of Jesus. Everywhere he went, he could not escape crowds. In fact, we read about him trying to get away from the crowds. It's like famous people today walking outside and having a paparazzi around them. This is Jesus. Thousands, tens of thousands of people are watching what he's doing because it's so miraculous, because his power is so great that everyone wants to see it. In addition to that, you have tens of thousands of people participating, watching, seeing these things happen. And no one is writing that they didn't happen. If tens of thousands of people are watching these things happen and it wasn't actually true, don't you think some of them would have gotten together and said, we got to stop this? Like, this is nonsense that people actually believe this. Don't you think we'd have some document, one, where somebody said, actually, he fed 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fish, but there was a food truck out back that no one's telling you about, right? These don't exist. There are no documents that tell us Jesus wasn't doing these things, and still thousands and thousands of people follow him wherever he goes. Did Jesus actually perform miracles? Yeah. No one's telling us that he didn't. In addition to that, we have eyewitness reports. Our New Testament writers cared a lot about the truth. They did not want to write things down that were not true. And so they go to lengths to tell us, people saw this happen. These were eyewitness reports. Luke writes this at the beginning of his gospel, Luke chapter 1. Many people have set out to write accounts about the events that have been fulfilled among us. They used the eyewitness reports circulating among us from the early disciples. Having carefully investigated everything from the beginning, I also have decided to write an accurate account for you, most honorable Theophilus, so that you can be certain of the truth of everything you were taught. Luke's a physician. Luke is scientific. He's methodical. He is writing at the very beginning. He says, people saw this. I have investigated this. I want you to know that what I'm writing is accurate. John mentions an eyewitness report. In the account of the crucifixion, John writes that a spear was stuck in Jesus' side, and out one side poured water and out the other side poured blood. And he notes right after that account, he says, this report is from an eyewitness giving an accurate account. He speaks the truth so that you also may continue to believe. Our writers care deeply that we know, as we read it 2,000 years later, that we know people saw this happen. Peter, as he writes a letter to an early church, he also notes that he was there. He saw it. He says, we were not making up clever stories when we told you about the powerful coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. We saw his majestic splendor with our own eyes when he received honor and glory from God the Father. Jesus was really creating a stir. Was he performing miracles? Absolutely he was, and no one is telling us otherwise. And it is precisely because Jesus was bringing so much power, because he was making such a wave in the world, that the religious leaders were very upset. Do you remember this? It's really the religious leaders, it's the Pharisees who ultimately crucified Jesus. The Romans carry out the crucifixion, but it is the religious leaders who condemn him. It is the religious people who don't like the power that Jesus is bringing. Why? It's because he wasn't doing it their way. Jesus was bringing such power in such a way that it made the religious people uncomfortable. And I don't want that for us. I don't want us to think of miracles in such a narrow fashion that it makes us a little uncomfortable. I want us to see all of God's power as miracles at work in the world around us. It's the Pharisees who ask Jesus for a sign. This is from Mark's gospel, and actually all four of our gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, have this account where Pharisees ask Jesus for a sign. When the Pharisees heard that Jesus had arrived, they came and started to argue with him. Testing him, they demanded that he show them a miraculous sign from heaven to prove his authority. At this point in all the Gospels, Jesus has performed a ton of miracles. He has healed people. He has raised people. Like, what do we mean? As we read this, we're like, what do they mean? They want a miraculous sign. This doesn't make any sense. In Jewish culture, when a prophecy was given, that prophecy needed a stamp of approval. It needed to be verified, and that was called a sign. And so when a prophecy is given, there was also a sign that kind of authenticated the prophecy. So when Jesus shows up in power, when he starts performing miracles, God's power at work in the world, the religious leaders are like, okay, we see the power, but where's the stamp of approval, Jesus? Where's the sign? That's a different Greek word than miracle. Where is the sign? The miracle is the power, but the sign is the verification. It's that you are trustworthy. And they put Jesus into their religious box because that's how it's always been done. And they say, cool, you got power, but how do we know? They're so blinded by religion. They're so blinded by how it should be that they're actually missing God's power at work. They're actually missing the miracles. And Jesus' response when they ask him, this is verse 12, when he heard this, he sighed deeply in his spirit. That's how Mark writes this. Jesus sighed deeply in his spirit. He is saddened to his core that the religious leaders are missing it. Why do these people keep demanding a miraculous sign? I tell you the truth, I will not give this generation any such sign. Jesus shows up in the power, and there are still people who miss it. And church, I don't want you to miss Jesus' power. I don't want us to be so blinded by the boxes that we put Jesus in that we don't feel his power, that we only think of miracles as definition 1 miracles, and we don't see it every single day in our life. And as Jesus sighs deeply in his spirit, I think what he wants from the religious leaders is for them to trust him. It's for them to simply have faith in who he is, true faith in who he is, that he is who he says he is. And there's another gospel account that illustrates faith really beautifully. It's a healing story, it's a miracle, but it shows us the power of pure faith. So I want you to take a look at this scene from The Chosen. It was your faith. What I don't want you to hear in that scene is that the level of your faith equals the amount of healing or the amount of miracle you're going to see. That's bad theology. If anybody's ever told you, you just need more faith and then you'll see the miracle, that's wrong. But what I do want us to hear is that we need to believe. Is that in changing our mind, opening our minds to the power of God at work in the world around us all the time, that matters. Jesus sighs deeply in his spirit when the Pharisees ask for a sign because they fundamentally missed it. I think when you and I say, well, when I see the definition 1 miracles, when I see the really crazy thing, that's when my faith will grow. That's when it will buy in. And it's really in the everyday things. Will you see the miracle definition of miracles? Absolutely. They happen around here all the time. We'll talk about that in a second. But more than that, I want you to know God's power all the time. This woman had so much faith that she knew if she could just get close to Jesus, like if she could just touch the fringe on his garment, that she would feel his strength, that she would know his power. It's true for us too, church. God wants to be in that kind of relationship with us, that we know deep in our spirit, if we can just be close to Jesus, if we can just get so close to him. Fun spoiler alert, he's already that close to you. You get Holy Spirit with you all day, every day, all the time. That power is with us all the time. And Jesus wants to be in this close, intimate relationship with us. I love that he gets down to her in that scene. And he looks at her. He calls her daughter. He welcomes her in. And he reminds her, the point isn't the miracle. He says, your faith has healed you. You saw my power and you believed in it. Your faith has healed you. Your suffering is over, church. Your suffering is over. That's the power of God at work in your life. That's a miracle for you today, that Jesus shows up in them. He meets you right where you are with his power to bring it into everything all the time. And that gets us to point number 3. Do miracles still happen? Again, the easy answer is say yes. Just ask people. For sure, miracles still happen all the time. We have definition 1 miracles around Hope all the time. It was about a year ago at this time. I was still on staff at Hope Waukee, and our prayer team had been praying with a gal who needed shoulder surgery. And we had been walking with her for a while, and it was to a point where she was like, okay, surgery is scheduled. We got to get this done. She couldn't lift it past a certain point. She very definitely had tears, like scans were showing, yeah, she needed surgery. And so we'd been praying with her for a long time, and it got to be the week of surgery. And she came in for prayer, and we were like, we're going to pray. And we were praying for miracles for months, like, Lord, heal whatever is going on, right? And the prayers this week were similar, like, Lord, heal her shoulder and work through the doctors, right? Like, I know that modern medicine is a miracle. And so we're praying for the doctors and her teams and all the things to go right in surgery and quick recovery. So we're praying for the surgery. So she goes to her pre-op appointment where they do pre-op scans. And she calls us on her way home from her pre-op appointment. And she says, guess what? What? I don't need surgery in a couple days. What? You just were in for your pre-op. She goes, for real. She said, they just scanned my shoulder. She goes, it started to feel better on my way. She was like, but I was like, I don't know, maybe it's just like good luck or something. She said, they scanned my shoulder and there's nothing wrong with it and I can lift it. And we were like, what? She said, seriously. They looked at the scans from months ago that showed all the tears, and they showed me my scans today, and I don't need surgery. They canceled my surgery. I am healed. She goes, my doctor was like, yeah, that's a miracle. I got no explanation. These happen all the time. That's a small story of things that truly do happen all the time. Do miracles still happen? Yes. Definition 1 miracles. And also, one of my favorite Bible verses, one of my favorite Bible stories is about us opening our eyes to what else God might have for us. This is 2 Kings chapter 6. In 2 Kings, Elisha is the prophet, and Elisha knows that the Aramean army is about to encircle the Israelites. And that's not good. They're worried about this. And Elisha's like, it's going to be fine. And Elisha's servant wakes up one morning, and he goes outside. This is the servant. There were troops, horses, and chariots everywhere. Oh, sir, what will we do now? The young man cried to Elisha. Don't be afraid, Elisha told him, for there are more on our side than on theirs. And Elisha prayed, O Lord, open his eyes and let him see. The Lord opened the young man's eyes, and when he looked up, he saw that the hillside around Elisha was filled with horses and chariots of fire. When his servant's eyes were opened, he could see God's army that had surrounded the Aramean army. So as we look for miracles, I pray that our eyes would be opened to the miracles that happen all day, every day in the world around us. Things like the seasons, things like the fact that we live in a planet, in a solar system, in a galaxy. Like, stars blow my mind. I don't even understand it all. Miracles. Things like when I get my kids home from daycare on any given night of the week, and we actually get to eat dinner without any sort of massive meltdown. Miracle. It's the little things that God's power shows up in all the time, and I wonder what it would look like to just open our eyes to that, to God's abundance, his power, his dunamis at work all the time, and I bet we'd start to see more of it. When our eyes are opened, they can't really be shut again. You start seeing God's power, you start seeing the miracles, and it's only going to get better from there. So why does this matter? It matters because Jesus wants to be in a relationship with you. Jesus wants you to know that being in a relationship with him will fundamentally change who you are. That the world will no longer be normal or mediocre, but that you will see God's power at work all the time, in all that you do. And that power lives in you. That power lives in you. Jesus commissions his disciples in Matthew chapter 10. He says, go and heal people. You have the power now to go cast out demons. You have the power, and it's going to go with you. This power was never about the miracle. It was always about God. It was always about Jesus. And he says, I want people to see that in you. So he gives it to his disciples, and he gives it to you and me, that we have the power to also perform miracles, to bring God's strength to the world around us. In Acts 3, Peter heals people. In Acts chapter 6, Stephen performs wonders and signs. Stephen was the first Christian martyr because of the wonders and signs that he was doing. In Acts chapter 9, Peter raises Tabitha from the dead. Did you know Jesus wasn't the only one who raised people from the dead? Peter does it. As the early church starts to take off, because God's power, his dunamis, the miracles are at work in and through them. In church, you and me, we are a part of this power. The fact that we're even here today, 2,000 years after Jesus lived, is proof of his power, is proof of his miracles. But then why does it matter? So that we take that power into the world around us. So that it doesn't just stop with the good stories, true stories of the Bible, but that it continues in the world around us all the time. And so here's what I want to leave you with. It's one of my favorite Bible verses, Romans chapter 8. The Spirit of God who raised Jesus from the dead lives in you. That is the kind of miracle power that goes before you, beside you, behind you, all around you, and within you. The Spirit of God who raised Jesus from the dead, it's in you, church. So miracles, I hope when you leave here, if somebody were to come up to you with a camera and say, have you ever seen a miracle? Do you know miracles? You'd be like, oh yeah, I'm a miracle, and let me show you all the miracles, all the good things, the power of God at work in the world around me.